Welcome to the TalentGrow Show, where you can get actionable, results-oriented insight and advice on how to take your leadership, communication, and people skills to the next level and become the kind of leader people want to follow. And now, your host and leadership development strategist, Halelly Azulay.
Hey there, talent growers. Welcome back. Episode 56 is a conversation I have been eager to share with you because it is about a topic that comes up a lot in my conversations with leaders that I work with, which is how to build trust with others and within your workplace. I'm Halelly Azulay, your leadership development strategist here at TalentGrow. And if you're a regular listener or reader of my blog, you might know that I am a pretty big neuroscience geek. So I'm super excited that I have been able to talk to the expert on trust and neuroscience today. On this episode, I chatted with Dr. Paul Zak. He's a PhD professor, neuroeconomist, and neuroscientist who was part of the team that first made the connection between the brain chemical oxytocin and trust. Paul is the author of the recently released and excellent book, Trust Factor, The Science of Creating High-Performance Companies. This is definitely one of those episodes that I would have liked to keep going for longer because there's so much fascinating stuff to discuss, but I did use self-regulation and I kept it to our 30-minute format, and yet we packed it full of lots of juicy, actionable content for you, like Paul's 8 ways to build trust within an organization, how to understand this thing called job crafting, and how to build a workplace culture in which people want to work their butts off. Whether you're a leader who's seeking to improve culture and performance in your employees and in your team, or just fascinated by the science of trust like me, this is definitely an episode you don't want to miss. And also, I play devil's advocate with Paul, and he gives a great comeback, so check it out. And here's a little challenge. As you're listening, I think Paul does a really good job of being a role model of one of his own bits of advice. So as you're listening, see if you can catch and notice what I'm talking about, and then tell me in the show notes comments after you listen what you thought it was. I'd love to know. All right, let's do this. Welcome back, talent growers. This is Halelly Azulay, your leadership development strategist, and I'm really excited for this week's guest, Paul Zak. He is the founding director of the Center for Neuroeconomic Studies and professor of economics, psychology, and management at Claremont Graduate University. He was part of the team of scientists that first made the connection between oxytocin and trust. And his TED Talk on this topic has received more than 1.4 million views. I'm going to definitely link to that in the show notes. He is also author of The Moral Molecules, and he has appeared on ABC World News Tonight, CNN, Fox Business, Dr. Phil, and Good Morning America. But now, the pinnacle of his career, he is on the TalentGrow Show. I'm just kidding, of course. Paul, welcome to the TalentGrow Show.
Thank you so much, Halelly. Happy to be on.
Well, I'm so happy that you have agreed to be on because I think that your topic, I have to tell you, on my list of topics that I was looking to do a show on was trust. Number one was trust. So when I was sitting on an airplane and I read your article on the Harvard Business Review called The Neuroscience of Trust and about your amazing book, which I have since read, The Trust Factor, I was like, oh, this is exactly what we need on this show because it is a topic that comes up so much and it is so tricky and so confusing. And so I can't wait to get into it with you. But before we go there, I always ask my guests to give us just a big picture overview of their professional journey. Where did you start? How did you get to where you are now?
Thank you for asking. I think I've always been interested in humans, the variation in human behavior, number one. Also, number two, how to use that knowledge to use resources efficiently. And so about 15 years ago, kind of happened on trust as a very interesting topic and somehow got sucked into spending the last 15 years of my life professionally studying it. So I think anyone who's interested in humans has got to be interested in the brain. And so, as you know, helped start this field, neuroeconomics, and now we've applied this to management, to marketing, lots of areas, because the humans are pretty interesting species, I've discovered.
Yeah, that's a nice way to say it, right? They're so tricky.
They're complicated, and I think the reason for neuroscience here, relevant to our discussion, is that people cannot tell you why they're doing what they're doing. And yet, by using technologies to measure brain activity, we can get really a deep sense of why people are behaving in particular ways. And then you can use that knowledge to create solutions to improve performance.
Yeah, and I'd love for you to describe a little bit more about the science that you use and how you do some of the studies, or you and your colleagues do some of the studies that are behind the 8 ways that you describe in your book, Trust Factor, the Science of Creating High Performance Companies, that help managers and leaders actively create high trust workplace cultures. I love how you say that the brain chemical oxytocin is the culprit, or is the key to trust. It is the main chemical that helps generate and fuel trust. And conveniently enough, the 8 ways that we can build trust, you have formed them into the acronym oxytocin, OXYTOCIN. I hope I'm spelling that right. First of all, everybody listening, you need to go get this book. This is such a great book, and I'm going to link to it in the show notes, because there's no way we can cover everything in depth here on this 30-minute podcast. But Paul, tell us briefly about these 8 ways.
Right. So the short backstory is, we did this fundamental basic research identifying oxytocin as this chemical that signals not only that we find someone trustworthy around us, but actually that we'll work hard to help that person. And so that got some media attention. And at some point, companies started knocking on my door saying, hey, we think trust is important in our organization. Can you help us measure and improve trust? And the original way we measured oxytocin was through blood draws. And so my first answer, because I'm a complete doofus, was, sure, I'll come and I'll take blood from your employees and we can measure their oxytocin. And these CEOs would just turn white and go, oh, no, can't take blood from our employees. That's a bad thing. And then I started thinking, if I'm some so-called trust expert and I can't actually advise businesses on how to create trust, I really don't think I'm much of an expert. So we started running experiments, measuring brain activity while people worked, first in my laboratory, and then actually at businesses. And as you know, a number of nice companies like Zappos and Herman Miller gave us permission to actually put their data in the book by name, and lots of other companies that we suppressed the names, so we could actually identify the factors that allowed us to create trust within organizations. And those are slightly different than one-on-one trust because they require more people to be involved in that interaction. And then we related those factors to organizational trust, and then things like productivity, innovation, retention, sick days. I mean, it all works so beautifully. So I'll go through those 8 just really, really briefly. I'll just define them each. So the O is for ovation. This is recognizing top performers. The X is for expectation. This is designing challenges for people at work. The Y is for yield, which is delegating authority to people who are doing the work. T is for transfer, which is enabling job crafting. The O is for openness, which is reducing uncertainty by being transparent in the sharing of information. C is for caring, which is intentionally building relationships with others at work. The I is for invest, which is helping colleagues grow professionally, personally, and spiritually. We could talk about that. And the N is for natural, which is, from a leadership perspective, being authentic, being vulnerable, asking people for help. So for each of these factors, we developed a measurement tool. As you know, for readers of the book, you have access to that tool. You can assess your own organization's trust directly and each of these factors. And I should say that neuroscience provides very precise ways to get the most impact when you change these factors to have the biggest impact on brain and behavior. So concrete example. So the first factor, ovation, recognizing high performers. And so listeners may be thinking, gosh, that was like first week in business school. We talked about how humans like recognition. Awesome. Except the neuroscience has shown very clearly that to get the biggest impact on individuals in terms of affecting future performance, recognition that is unexpected, that is close in time to when a goal is met, that comes from peers, that is tangible, that is personal, that is public, all those factors will make any recognition program have a bigger impact. And when you do these ovations in public, not only do you recognize the highest performers, you give them a chance to debrief, to talk about how they achieve this high performance so others can learn from them. And you set up aspirations for others observing this ovation so that they can also be be recognized by their community. So again, the book is super practical. It takes all this neuroscience and just gets it down to do these things.
Yeah, I agree. And I can tell you, I mean, not only are there stories in there about examples, like at this company, this is what they did, and these are the financial results, the bottom line results, and so forth, but you also break down the science. You really make it easy to understand by explaining the actual process of when we do this, it releases oxytocin in this way. And we did this study and it showed, and then it caused people to take this next action and so forth. And you talk about some things that backfire, right? So especially, with innovation, like the idea that, for example, you want to make sure that it's really close to the event, which is something that I also teach, because otherwise it has really very low effect. It doesn't actually cause a release of oxytocin if it's something that's sort of very passe.
Yeah, and it's really creating this tight feedback loop in the brain that recognizes people at work as members of a community, right? We're in this community of people who have essentially voluntarily pledged to work hard for the purpose of the organization and for the people in it and for the stakeholders. And I want to create an environment where that pledge can be fulfilled, where you feel good about it, you take ownership over what you've done, but you recognize that you're in service to the people around you. Mm-hmm. And we've, as you know from the book, we've shown experimentally, and other groups have as well, when you have this higher purpose, what I call transcendent purpose, when you recognize that the hard work you're doing has a positive impact both on your colleagues at work, but also in all the stakeholders that depend on you, then people are really motivated. And so that purpose has got to be lived. It's got to be an important part of the DNA of that organization.
Did you find that any of the 8 factors, I don't know if you're calling them factors, elements, ways, that any of them are either more important than the others in terms of building trust, or that they are prerequisites to the others?
Oh, what a great question. So the factors are ordered. So the overall thesis of the book is that once you have a way to measure trust, you should actively manage it for high performance. And it's very similar to the Toyota production system. Measure, intervene, see if the intervention had a positive effect on performance. And if so, continue with it. If not, you can roll it back, and continuously improving culture. So it's really a continuous process. Because each of these factors has, so I've used a technical word, a concave effect on performance. So it means as the factors get closer to their maximum value, like 100%, if I go from 90 to 95, the effect on performance is much less than if I go from 20 to 25. Okay. So what we recommend to organizations we've worked with is start with the lowest factor. You'll get the biggest impact on performance by increasing the lowest factor, and then just keep working on that. And for companies that have different geographic organizations, different business units, we also break it down by business unit, by organization. So perhaps the Santa Monica office is killing it, right? Great. Trust is super high. They're really productive. Awesome. Find out what they're doing in Santa Monica, right? Just copy that. And the Kansas City office is just, sucking wind. Well, what's happening in Kansas City? What can you import from Santa Monica and apply it to Kansas City? Or often, as you know, Halelly, the IT group often is very beat down because everyone complains to them. So we find often that folks in the IT business unit don't have a lot of trust. They feel very stressed. And so, so take what's happening in, sales, where people really rock and roll and they're doing great, and try to apply that same culture intervention or culture practices to the guys in IT.
Okay. So when you say take the lowest factor, you mean the one that you have the least of?
Right. So this online tool quantifies each of these 8 factors, and it does it on a 1 to 100 scale. So if your motivation is lowest, great. And as you remember in the book, we actually report the amount of impact each of those factors have on overall organizational trust. And they're all around 50% or higher. And of course, they're not statistically independent. Anyway, so the one that's going to have the biggest impact is the one that's lowest. And you'll know that because you've measured. And so that's important. Okay,
cool. And that tool is free on your website, right?
It is, absolutely. So help yourself. Again, it's going to be your, you as a leader, for example, your individual view. And to really get validated, you want lots of people in your organization to use the survey. Mm-hmm. But as a start, and particularly when you're reading the book, yeah, so you do this survey, you find out for the fourth factor, I'm really low. Let's say that fourth factor is called transfer. So I'm really low on transfer. So when I read the book, I actually say in the introduction, you can start writing the transfer chapter, right? If you want to skip ahead and see, here's what I need to do. And as you remember, after every chapter, I what's called a Monday morning list. So
Yeah.
Monday morning, here are some things you can do immediately. So the book is really about practice. There's a little bit of the science in there, but it's really about doing things that are just going to make the culture for the humans who are doing all the work more engaging, more productive. And then, as you know, we also see that people who work in these high trust, high purpose organizations enjoy their jobs a lot more. And so that's not a bad place to start.
Yeah, and it creates that wonderful virtuous cycle. You know, they enjoy their job more, they work better, the culture improves, the work product improves, and everything.
And they're healthier, they're happier, they're happier outside of work. And so I think it's really recognizing these volunteers in your workplace as whole human beings.
Yeah.
They have a life outside of work, they have emotions, they have their own fears and worries. And if you accept that we're all imperfect, but if you provide the right environment, people actually will work their butts off for something they really care about and for people that they trust.
Yeah. So you mentioned transfer. Let's talk about that for a second, because again, like it's really challenging. I want to talk to you about all 8. So for transfer, you say that that's enabling self-management and job crafting. First of all, just make sure that everybody's on the same page. What do you mean by job crafting? And then the way you describe it in the book, you say that it's kind of like this. It sounds to me like, you know, the anti-micromanagement, a very flat and unstructured kind of approach to letting people do what they think is right. You describe a company, Valve, that does this really well. So it made me think of this concept of holacracy. It made me think that there are certain industries where it might work better than others. And so let's talk more about transfer. What is job crafting? And does this kind of idea work in all kinds of workplaces?
That's a great question. So job crafting is allowing people to choose how they allocate their time at work. So instead of me assigning a job to you, I come on our Monday morning all hands meeting and say, look, we got this new client and it's going to be a 3-month project. Who would like to work on this project? Who would like to lead a team? We'll build a team around you. So this allows you to have complete buy-in. It's your project. So Halelly, it's your project. You've got 5 people we're going to have work with you on this project. You take ownership of it. And then I, as your, say, supervisor, I'm going to do check-ins with you. I'm going to make sure you're hitting milestones. I'm going to set clear expectations. So a number of companies like Valve, which is an online game software maker, they hire really smart, interesting people, and they give them desks with wheels. And their employee handbook actually says, find a work group that's doing something that seems interesting and exciting to you. Ooh, that's a whole different ballgame than we hired you to work in this cubicle and do this job, right? This says you're here because we want you to be innovative. We want you to be passionate about what you're doing. So hop around and find a place where you can create some value. So when you have job crafting, then essentially everyone starts to talk about value creation. So again, if I have someone in my group who hasn't taken over a project, who isn't engaging, I just have a conversation with you now. We're like, you know, you've been on some other people's teams, right? It's time for you to run your own team to pick up a project, or it may not work for you. So yeah, as we did this work, my concern was this sounds like a great approach for knowledge workers, so-called knowledge workers. I think actually everyone today is a knowledge worker, but for traditional knowledge workers, it seems like, yeah, you know, we're doing client-based work, we can figure it out. So I spent a lot of time at a company that was profiled in HBR about 3 years ago called Morningstar Tomato. This is the largest, Central Valley of California. It's the largest producer of tomato products in the world. So tomato paste, tomato sauce. And 80% of their employees, actually they don't call them employees, they call them colleagues. So I like that term a lot better. 80% of their colleagues are seasonal workers. They work 6 to 7 months during the harvesting season, and everybody self-manages. So I thought, gee, if job crafting really works, it's got to work in this heavy industry, blue collar kind of workplace. And indeed, it works spectacularly well. Now, perfectly, of course, and we could talk more about Morningstar, but very interesting company where the value of job crafting from a trust perspective is that I have to go and reach out to other people, and get them to work on my projects with me. And so now I have a motivation to build those ties, to find out more about you, find out who has time, who has resources, as opposed to just being slotted in this little narrow bin.
It sounds so amazing, but I don't like to use the word, but I'm about to do a devil's advocate thing.
Sure.
The cynic listening might say, that sounds like anarchy, and everybody's going to be all huddling, at the really coolest project. And then, the grunt work that needs to happen is not going to get done because nobody wants to wheel their desk there.
Right. And so sometimes, people have to want to do this. So as I mentioned, Zappos data actually is in the book. Zappos has used a version of this called Holacracy, which is kind of a lattice organization, and where you have overlapping circles of responsibility. And so again, the goal is you've got to have really clear milestones. We've got to know what we're aiming for, and you've got to know who can help you with these different projects to move them forward. And so there are a lot of lattice design organizations. W.R. Gore, which is the maker of Gore-Tex and lots of other chemically based products. Not only do they have this lattice organization, but they also keep work groups small. So even in their production plants, they're never bigger than 200 people, because after 200, it's hard to know anybody, right? And at Gore, their work groups are limited to 15. So you may have 200 people in total, but there are 15 that you're typically working with. So we talk a little in the book about the optimal size of these work groups, and so it requires a different view of organization. But again, one of the themes of the book, as you remember, Halelly, is that everyone's a volunteer, right? So if you're a volunteer, I want to create an environment where you can really get into what you're doing. You can really expend your passion because you know why it's important and you know who depends on you to make this happen.
Yeah.
And that spurs the brain to make oxytocin, to develop trusting relationships with others, and then to perform at your best.
Yeah. And I guess we didn't really talk about this at depth. I'm making an assumption maybe that people understand, but that link between oxytocin and trust you just described, that's the thing that the science shows us. It's not that this all sounds nice, but in fact, we're hardwired to create kind of a generous loop that builds higher trust, which builds higher connections, which builds higher performance because of these chemicals we're releasing that we're not consciously in charge of any of that.
Exactly. And so, we've run so many experiments where we measure brain activity while people work. And one thing we found is that when people work in high trust environments, really they perform better, but they actually shed the stress of work faster. So you do this task, have you all wired up and getting lots of data out of your brain. And then when the task is over, we keep the equipment on you for another 5 minutes and we watch how fast you return to baseline. And when you're around people that care about you, that are working together efficiently, you just shed that stress more rapidly. Mm-hmm. So there's so many, details of the way the brain works that are useful in the book that tell us why these factors work. Not just that we sort of guessed and we tried, and you could kind of guess and try, but if you start with how's the brain work and how's the brain work in groups of individuals, then it gives you a structure to think about how to create cultures in which people can be as high performing as possible.
Yeah, that's awesome. So just recently, I was describing to some people about, I also talk about being vulnerable and being open and reciprocity, how it creates this, people are much more willing to be virtuous when you're virtuous with them and open. And I almost always have someone who says, that's not how I see the world. And when you're open or vulnerable, there are predators who will just eat you for breakfast. They will just take advantage of you. And if you show that kind of vulnerability, that is an invitation for those people to do something terrible to you. How do you answer those people? I'm sure you've heard them too.
I have. And I think there's two answers. One is that there's so much science, as I talk about in the book, that talks about how vulnerability is a great stimulus for getting people to help you. So again, I can demand you to help me if I'm your supervisor. I can demand you do something, or I can say, this is an area we really need to develop in our company. And Halelly, I know you have expertise in this area. Would you have time in your schedule to help me with this? Because I think you're the best person to do it, and we really need this. That's a different conversation than, I don't really know how this system works. You seem to know it. You need to work on this. So I think if you have people who are attacking you because you're being authentic, there's probably no place at this organization for you. I think it's time to go. I tell the story in the book about this, the consulting company I work in the southern U.S., where we had one guy. I worked with the senior leaders on creating a culture of trust for a couple of days, and this one guy was a real skeptic. And I think, after spending 2 days with him, he had kind of come around more or less. But yeah, within 6 months, he was gone. So of the 6 guys in the leadership team, one had to go. And, that happens. He just wasn't on board. He wanted not to trash our dear friends in Texas, but he was from Texas, and he was this very dismissive, well, I'll just tell people what to do. I'm like, well, okay, that's micromanaging, and then you're essentially a bully. And so if you want to bully me, honestly, I'm productive. I can go other places, right? I don't want to be bullied. I don't want to be micromanaged. So being vulnerable is one way that you reduce the tendency that sometimes we have as leaders to kind of bully people into doing what we want them to do.
Yeah. I love it. Oh my gosh, I want to talk to you for so much longer. So we have a private Facebook group that is open to anyone who's a listener of the Talent Grow Show. It's called the Talent Growers Community. And listeners, if you're not a member of that group, come join us. And so one of our colleagues, Lorianne Roth, submitted a question for you when I was bragging about how excited I was to interview you, and asked if people had questions. And so what she said was, what do you think about when people take the approach of just letting their employees fail on purpose? And I think what she means is that whole, throw them off a cliff and see if they can fly. Do you think that this is something that is going to build trust, or does it damage trust?
That's a great question. Thanks to Lorianne for that great question. So I talk a lot about this in the book, about the importance of failure, creating a tight feedback loop in the brain. But you've got to be allowed to fail in an environment that actually cares about you and is supportive. So many companies, tech companies like in Silicon Valley, will have these monthly congratulations, you screwed up celebrations, where people come in and talk about the biggest error they made that month and what they learned from it. And so other people can learn from those mistakes. So again, think of the feedback loop in the brain. So I give you some rope, you try something, it screws up. You come in my office, tell me, and I scream at you. 20 minutes. What's that say in your brain? It says, if you take a risk and try something new and it doesn't work out, you get punished. I'm not going to take another risk again. But if I celebrate what you've done and give you a chance to learn from it and share that learning with others, then I'm saying, yeah, take more risks, try innovating, right? So again, as a leader, you always want to have those risk management backstops. I don't want you to bet the company on something, but yeah, try, make a minimum viable product, try something new. Let's see if it works. Invest a couple of weeks of time and money, and then let's talk about it. So I'm a big believer in failure. It is the best way to learn. And we tell kids this, right? We say, oh, it's school is all about trying stuff and failing and getting feedback. And then all of a sudden you're an adult and you don't get to fail anymore. It's kind of insane.
Yeah. Well, we need to start wrapping up, Paul. So I am sad because I have too many more questions I'd like to ask you. Maybe we'll have a round 2 or something in the future. But before you give everyone a super actionable tip and they learn how to stay in touch with you, what's new and exciting on your horizon? Do you have a new project or anything that you're working on that's got you energized?
Thank you for asking. I mean, what we've done recently is to build out not just the survey, but culture intervention tools using micro-learning videos. So these little whiteboard animated videos. And so we've had a lot of fun working with clients now, in which you say, okay, I'm not very good at ovation or not very good at transfer. We think that's important for our business. Let's create interventions. And as you know, it takes about 30 days to change a habit. So we basically nag you in a nice way for 30 days to begin changing the way you interact with your colleagues. And in this way, we find significant increases in people's engagement, their trust, their performance. And so for me, it's so fun to work at scale, to work with companies where there are 5,000 or 10,000 people and say, okay, we're doing this new thing, you guys. We think it's going to be great for you as colleagues. We also think it's going to be great for the organization. So for 30 days, we're going to remember to do this thing, to thank someone who helps us, to provide points to someone towards a gift. And so, these interventions are in some sense, it's stuff you learned in first grade, right? Say please and thank you, recognize people who work really hard, and then give people some chances to do what they really want to do, give them the freedom, the trust to be excellent.
Awesome. Well, and those are going to be available to your clients, these micro learning videos?
They are. So you can reach me at Paul at ofactor.com, O like oxytocin. So ofactor.com, tons of information, free stuff, downloads, case studies, and love to talk to your listeners. So they can reach out to me anytime. And more about me at pauljzak.com.
Great. And you're also, I know that you're on social media because I was able to reach you that way.
Oh. Yes, on Twitter at Paul J. Zak. So sign up. I really love this stuff. After 15 years, I'm in. You can't get me out of this. I'm excited. I love helping people. And so please feel free, anybody listening, to reach out. And I try to end every conversation, Haley, with the word service. I want to do the same thing with you. You are wonderful to have me on. I want to continue to be of service to you. So please, I want you to reach out to me when I can help you with something, and I'd be glad to do that.
Well, I appreciate that. So before we wrap up, we always leave on something super actionable. What would be one actionable tip that you can give listeners that they can take action on today or this week to ratchet up their own leadership effectiveness from the trust perspective, of course?
I think the easiest thing sounds stupidly simple, but we forget about it. And that's saying please and thank you. So just say, would you please do this for me? And when it's done, thank you very much. I recognize that it took effort on your part. And so it sounds stupid, but man, the humans love it.
That's very, very actionable. I love it. All right. Well, I will link to everything that we talked about in the show notes and ways to get in touch with you. And I really appreciate you giving us of your time and your wisdom. I hope that everyone who has listened will go grab a copy of your book. It really is excellent. Trust Factor, the science of creating high performance companies, and stay in touch with you. Paul, thank you for coming on the TalentGrow Show.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, what did I tell you? I wanted to keep going and going. So what did you think? Please and thank you. And also, did you notice what I meant about Paul modeling his own advice? I'll look for your input in the comments on the show notes page at talentgrow.com/podcast/episode 56. We're proud that our show is featured as part of the C-Suite Radio network of business podcasts geared to add value to your personal and professional life. So make sure to visit us over there at csuiteradio.com. That's c-suiteradio.com. And as I mentioned in the episode, you should definitely come join us in our community of listeners in our Facebook group called Talent Growers Community. So just go into Facebook, search for the group Talent Growers Community and ask to join, and I will approve you. And thanks again for listener Lori Ann for her great question, which we read on the air and Paul answered. Okay, Talent Growers, I hope you enjoyed this episode and that you'll tell at least one other person about it. Help them download it, help them figure out how to play it if they're not a regular listener of podcasts, and more people will grow their leadership skills. I'm Halelly Azulay, your leadership development strategist here at TalentGrow. Thank you so much for listening. And until the next time, make today great.
Thanks for listening to the Talent Grow Show, where we help you develop your talent to become the kind of leader that people want to follow. For more information, visit talentgrow.com.